Welcome to the Aus Asia Business Program with your host, Stacey Martin. Stacey brings together experts, ideas and information on how to navigate business opportunities in Asia.
Dajahal, welcome to the Aus Asia Business Program. I'm Stacey Martin, and today we have Simon Henry. Simon is the founder of Uwai, a tourism platform which supports businesses in the tourism sector to tap into the China market with a range of services. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Stacey.
So Simon, tell me a little bit about yourself and your career journey so far.
It's certainly been an interesting one. I've lived in Asia now for a little over 22 years. I was an exchange student to Thailand at the age of 15, where I was plonked in the middle of nowhere with a heap of people who didn't speak any English. And lo and behold, after about a year, I became fluent in Thai with a little bit of Laotian and Cambodian on the side.
Fantastic.
I then came back to Australia and I worked for the family company, which was manufacturing, so small business in Brisbane. And then worked for LJ Hooker, where I was the head of IT for 5 years. Then moved on to realestate.com.au, where I was head of global product. And then ran a media agency out of Macau for 4 years.
Wow.
Before founding Uwai, which is the property portal. We exited that company a couple of years ago, and now we've founded and started Uwai.
So I'm really interested in your Uwai platform because, you know, as we started to see Chinese looking to invest in Australia, and particularly in the property sector, which they love, you saw a gap in the market for serving, potential Chinese investors. Tell us about how you built that platform and some of the learnings. I know you went into China, you've had some experience in Asia, but how did you go about all that?
Look, I think it's the old saying that if we knew then what we know now, we would never have done it. There's a certain amount of hubris available in setting up a company anywhere in the world, let alone mainland China.
Yeah.
My co-founder and I were based in Hong Kong and Macau at the time, and it was literally just a case of being in the right place at the right time.
Okay.
It was the tail end of the global financial crisis. The world was going to hell in a handbasket. 747s of expats were being fired and leaving Hong Kong. And we decided to do probably the silliest thing we've ever done, and that's quit our jobs and do a startup focused on outbound Chinese investment. So we'd never lived in China before. We'd only ever spent 2 days in Shanghai on a visit prior. We didn't speak Mandarin. And so we packed up our house and moved to Shanghai and set up a company.
And Shanghai was a lot different back then, wasn't it? It's evolved so much.
Oh, it very much was. I mean, we just didn't, there's a certain amount of craziness which you require where you just jump in and you do something because you don't know any better. And we just went up there and eating an elephant starts one bite at a time.
With your background in some real estate and IT, you know, you obviously had some skills in terms of setting up the platform, but there would have been quite a few differences targeting the Chinese market.
Very much so. I mean, China has always been like a micro ecosystem whereby a lot of the Chinese platforms and sites service the mainland Chinese market because it's just so big that they don't really need to go international or expand. We were one of the first businesses which really looked at the Chinese outbound investor.
Right.
Because we had that magic mix of being a blend of international and Asia. The Chinese couldn't do what we were doing because they didn't understand the West. The Westerns couldn't do what we're doing because they didn't understand China. We were that bridge which came in the middle, which actually made all the parts fit together. And to this day, it's still probably the most successful platform in terms of generating information about this opaque market, which is the high net worth Chinese tourist and investor.
And with the property, was it just residential or commercial? What sort of areas of interest did the Chinese investor have, and how were you able to solve for those?
It was actually really quite interesting because even though the property was the product, if you like, and we were ostensibly marketing property around the world, the first thing we had to do is educate the Chinese consumer about the world. So in actual fact, we were doing things like destination marketing, saying how to get there, what flights are available, education, food, you name it. So it was all kind of blended together. And then property was just one of the product lines which we were marketing and looking at. We were the first people to come up with the 4 major drivers of Chinese investment abroad. And that was lifestyle, investment, education, and immigration. And
so
that's now being used universally.
Lifestyle, investment, education,
Immigration,
and the immigration. So, we've seen a number of immigrants come into our country, whether it's for education, starting with, university, for businesses, and also the significant investor visa that I was involved with. So you provide a platform that people could inquire about a number of different aspects.
Yeah, it was really just a case of making people aware of what they didn't know. I mean, we had people who we spoke to on the streets of Shanghai, and they'll be saying, oh, look, my daughter's going to university in California. Mm-hmm. I'm looking to move to New York. Can I just drive over and see her every weekend? People just didn't know what they didn't know. It's almost like the Americans in the 80s, where you ask them to plot a pin on the map where Australia was, and half of the pins end up in Canada and the other half in Mexico.
Or Austria.
So really this is a case of how do we educate the Chinese consumer about the world at large, because
that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting with this significant investor visa, which I was involved and still consulting, is that migration agents say, which state of Australia do you want to go to? Well, which place do most people go? Well, a lot of them go to Melbourne. Okay, I'll go there. So they haven't really done their due diligence, have they?
Absolutely. I mean, and there is a dearth of information available, and sometimes there's also too much information, because Australia forgets that we're not New South Wales isn't competing with Victoria. Australia is competing with the UK and Canada, the USA, and so really putting that Australia first policy forward works in our favour as a nation as a whole, regardless of where the investment or the education ultimately ends up.
And so you talked about another key area being tourism, which is one of Australia's largest exports. So having exited that business, you've now created a platform to serve the tourism market. Tell us about that.
I mean, the tourism sector itself is 4 times bigger than the property market globally.
Wow.
And tourism globally, it employs about 300 million people across the planet. I mean, it's pretty huge. And in Australia alone, the Chinese spent roughly $10.9 billion on pure tourism last year. But that's only a fraction of the benefit of tourism. I'd like to say that tourism is the gateway industry. If you have a successful tourism experience, then what you get after that is things like product exports, education exports, investment, immigration. And so the net benefit of Chinese tourists as a gateway industry is more in the tune of $100 billion a year. So it is significant. And it's a market which we kind of put our hat on the laurel going, aren't we doing a wonderful job? But few people realize the depth of tourism goes far beyond just someone coming here for a visit.
Look, and I think, we talk about over 1 million tourists here, but, from China, but also Bali has, that much, if not more. So, you've seen a huge growth in travellers from China as they move through that, middle class and want new experiences. And then obviously they get to experience the world, as you say, and get attracted by, our produce, our education, a whole lot of other opportunities that we can potentially tap into.
Absolutely. If you look at Japan, they received over 6 million tourists from mainland China last year. Thailand received over 8 million. Australia received 1.3 million. But a little known fact is that Australia's market share of outbound Chinese tourists has actually fallen for the last 3 years in a row. So as more Chinese travel, fewer of them are coming to Australia.
Okay, and I think you talk about that being more of a bucket list destination than a repeat destination.
Correct. The big trick, if you look at the United States, the Chinese will visit the United States maybe 2 or 3 times a year as a preferred destination. Most people who come to Australia, our repeat visitation of pure free independent travellers is quite low. We've got a very good student market. We've got a very good visiting family and friends market. But of pure tourists who just love to go experience something multiple times, generally they'll come to Australia for 14 days. They'll go to 6 or 7 cities during that time. And then they'll say, done. I don't need to go there next. Where's next? Oh, Turkmenistan. I've never been there.
So we've been listening to Simon Henry from Uwai. So after the break, we're going to talk a little bit more with Simon about how Australian businesses can be part of this growing trend of tourism and I guess the platform that you have developed.
Fantastic. I look forward to it.
Aus Asia is taking a short break. If you'd like to sponsor this show or be part of Eagle Waves Radio, go to our website, eaglewavesradio.com.au and contact us. Hey Tess, don't you employ overseas staff and you've been thinking about expanding your business offshore?
Yeah, I have been.
And you have investors that are also considering moving to Australia.
I do.
So a registered migration agent could probably help you with the right visa solution.
But how do you find the right one?
Industry body Migration Alliance has over 4,800 registered agents.
What's the best way to contact them?
Email help@migrationalliance.com.au and you'll find a MARA registered agent right near you.
Cool.
And now, back to you, Stacey.
Welcome back. I'm Stacey Martin. This is the Aus Asia Business Program. And today I'm talking to Simon Henry. Simon has a platform called Uwai, which supports Australian tourism businesses. Simon, I'd love to talk to you more about this platform and how businesses get involved. But I mean, firstly, you actually have launched it in South Australia and have had some very, very rapid response. Tell us about that.
We came to South Australia in late 2017. It was our global first launch market. We wanted a market which we could launch into and test and get all the bugs out of the system. And we were hoping to have about 800 businesses on board in South Australia by now. Well, we've got a little over 3,500, so we're well ahead of where we wanted to be. But really, the genesis of Uwai came down to us trying to solve three major problems. One is that Australia is a very difficult country to visit if you don't speak English.
Right.
So of the $10.9 billion spent by Chinese tourists last year, I think there's another $10 billion left on the table from the people who don't even come here because they're too scared.
Okay.
They're not fluent in English, they're not comfortable. And Australia is generally not terribly welcoming to non-English speakers. We're not equipped to it. I lived in Shanghai and all the subways are in dual languages. The menus were in dual languages. The street signs were in dual languages.
Yes.
And so it's quite easy to get around if you don't speak Chinese. And I'm not saying that all our street signs and bus shelters should become Chinese, because the reality is the mobile phone has become the new tour guide. What we're suggesting is, how do we make it a little bit easier for Chinese to come and visit Australia by making sure the content is available to them at point of sale and with the businesses? How do we make it easy for businesses to connect with the tourists who are already here?
Okay.
There's so much misinformation or too much information running around about, okay, to target Chinese, you've got to do this or hire this system or set up this platform. Really what we say is, look, just give us your content in English. We'll take care of the translation and we'll take care of the distribution of that content, not only in your shopfront, but on digital platforms around the world.
So in terms of digital platforms, you're on what, websites, apps, WeChat?
Correct. We've got our own apps, which people don't need to download to use or access our content. We've got all of our content's real-time synced into mainland China.
Wow.
We're integrated with WeChat. And at the moment, it's our platform's in 3 languages: English, Simplified Chinese, and Traditional Chinese. And we can add more languages to this as we grow. So it's digital infrastructure, if you like. Do it once, and then it's just done for everybody.
So a company in Australia that is, I don't know, a restaurant, a tourism attraction, a hotel, how do they go about getting onto the platform?
So they can just come to uwai.com and click the Join Now, and that'll take you through the process to sign up and come on board with Uwai. You just put in your business details, your business overview in English, and click Submit, and we take care of it from there. The businesses don't have to worry about anything else.
So, but as I understand, things like packaging, the sorts of things that people like, Chinese have traditionally, been wanting to fit a lot of things into a day. There's an evolution of sort of self-directed travel. How do you help these businesses think about what it is they're offering and if they should be doing something different?
Look, one of the biggest things is, for any tourist who comes to Australia, what they want to have is an authentic experience.
Right.
The biggest problem they've got is just not understanding what's available. Like, even if you fly into South Australia, there's a big sign at the airport saying, "Welcome to South Australia. See Kangaroo Island, Barossa and Hahndorf," as if they're the only 3 things to do. The reality is that you can come to South Australia for 2 or 3 weeks and just enjoy South Australia. And the next trip, come back to New South Wales. The next trip, come back to Queensland. So it's about, how do you provide the depth and breadth of information to help Chinese understand that, wow, there's far too much for me to do here in a 2-day stopover.
Right.
I'm going to make this a destination in itself. So number one is make sure the information is available as broadly and as widely as possible, and also accessing the people who are walking past your front door. The best analogy I can give is have you ever been to Paris and ended up having dinner at McDonald's? And it really is quite true that if it's 6 p.m. at night and you're cold and you're hungry and you don't speak the language, you see something which you recognise, that's where you're going to go and have a meal.
And
let's say that similarly, that the French restaurant had their menu available in English. That just makes it a little bit easier. It breaks down the barriers.
Look, and I think many businesses have started to cater for the Chinese market, whether it's menu options. I know when I travel into Asia, there'll be sort of English, Western-style food and sort of Chinese or Asian-style food. And hotels are doing that to some extent, but I wonder if they're doing enough really understanding what the market's looking for, not just the language, but, other things to cater for.
I think the most important thing is to make sure that you actually give a good description to what the product which you're offering.
Right.
But the things which are important to Chinese are, is it locally grown? Is it locally produced? Has it got a story behind where the food comes from or the product comes from or how it's made? That story is important because it's something which you then want to share with your friends and your social networks. You want to have the brag factor. Whereas if you just walk up to a restaurant and it just says fish and chips, it's not nearly as compelling as this fish was bought this morning locally from the local da-da-da-da-da-da, and this is a classic Australian fish, and it's got these type of flavours. That would be really, really quite interesting to a tourist.
And I know that, one of the influencers was photographed with, say, the lavender bear down in Tasmania, and that's become a real sort of tourist icon, such that Xi Jinping actually visited on his last trip.
Absolutely, and I think that one of the biggest lessons here is be a good business at home. Because if you're a good business at home, you're servicing the local Australian market, then your chances of being popular with international tourists is twice as high.
Right. Yes.
So you can't really package something up for China. Be good locally, and then the Chinese word of mouth will help you to be successful internationally.
And that word of mouth is so important because, they're constantly taking photographs and putting it out onto social media. So making it, as you say, unique, different, authentic. We're seeing people not just going to the major cities, but going out to the regional areas, aren't we?
Oh, we can see definitively now that Chinese tourists are going to every single tourism region of South Australia. They're accessing our content from the borders of the Northern Territory, the borders of Western Australia, and the borders of New South Wales and Victoria. They're going deep into the regional South Australia market, and we know the tourists are going deep into every regional area of Australia. There's just been never any quantifiable data about that. And this is the third thing which Uwai was credited to do, was how do we get data insights into a market which everyone knows the top line, the number of arrivals and departures, but no one knows what they actually do when they're here.
So that's the data that your system is collecting.
Powerful. Yeah. Correct.
So you've established in Adelaide, you've had some great success, way more than you thought in terms of the number of operators that have signed up. What states are you going to next? And should operators in the rest of Australia be starting to connect with you?
Absolutely. We're looking to be Australia-wide by the end of the year. We think that this is an opportunity which is just too good to miss. One of the reasons why we set up Uwai is we're really concerned that Australia may miss out on this opportunity. And it is a global tourism boom, not just relating to the Chinese, but we see increased tourism outbound from America, from Asia, from Japan, you name it. So if someone would like to connect to us, you can go to uwai.com, click on the Join Now, and that comes through our process to get you on board. And
the airlines, more flights from China and other jurisdictions is making it easier as well.
Absolutely. And to that point, a lot of the airlines from China are saying, look, I was thinking about sending a plane to this city, but there's nothing to do there. In reality, what we're saying is, look, if you come to this city, there's 5,000 restaurants and there's 7,000 retail outlets, and it really gives depth to the message because ultimately airlines want to sell more seats. They sell more seats by letting people know that here's activity or a journey or a unique experience you can have when you arrive.
So collaboration between the operators, I guess, is important as well. So I guess I'd like to just finish with what are your top tips for those businesses here looking to tap into the tourism market?
Number one is be tourist ready. Don't get concerned about being China ready or America ready. Be tourist ready. And these are simple things which you can do. You can smile and be friendly to tourists. The experiences which they share will ensure that we get repeat visitation and positive reviews of Australia as a whole. And it's also no special skills, and we don't have to wait on anyone to do this. Just be friendly to tourists. If you see someone who's lost, who's got a map in their hand, ask them if they need a hand. That can go a long way to building the brand reputation of Australia and facilitating the future tourist.
Oh, and as a friendly destination, absolutely.
Yeah. Number two, we talk about being Chinese ready, not China ready. There's 70 million mainland Chinese who travel internationally each year, but there's another 70 million Chinese who live outside of China who travel internationally each year. So Uwai is in English, Simplified Chinese and Traditional Chinese. So by being in the right Chinese languages, you can double your available market share.
Okay.
And the third thing is be great locally and then translate it into the right languages. So be a good business locally. Offer a great product and a great service and a compelling offering to the local market, and then the international tourists will pick up on that reputation.
And of course, you've got to be easy to find, which is where your platform's going to be integral to growth in tourism going forward. And people can find out your details on our website. So I'm Stacey Martin, host of the Aus Asia Business Program. Today you've been listening to Simon Henry from Uwai Tourism Platform. So Sheshe Simon and Zaijian to our listeners.
Thank you for listening to the Aus Asia Business Program with our host, Stacey Martin, our Asian business specialist and expat financial advisor. Powered by Eagle Waves Radio and broadcasting proudly from Vivo Cafe, Sydney.